So, hey, Rachel, thanks for joining me this morning on my podcast. We've had a lovely conversation even before we got started. So I feel like I've known you for a long time now. And of course, I've been reading your book too. So that really helps getting to know you. So I'm so excited to have you on. I have so many things I want to talk to you about. But first of all, I'm just going to let you tell our audience briefly a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your story, why you wrote the book, and whatever else you'd like to tell us before we get into our conversation.
Well, I'm very excited to be here too, because I think you and I, we are kind of kindred spirits, aren't we? We've been doing similar things, but on different sides of the pond.
Yep.
And we were talking earlier as well that we both actually went through an early menopause, although mine was a bit earlier than yours. And it was this early menopause at 41. Well, it was the menopause diagnosis, because as I'll explain, I think it was wrong, but I was told I'd gone through early menopause at 41. And that really did influence me massively in terms of what I do now and why I wrote the book. So I talk about the book. The book is called Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. And when I went through the early menopause, I found out because I was trying for another child. So I'd had one child. I got divorced. I left my first husband. One of the reasons I left him is because he didn't want me to have another child. And I desperately wanted another one. And I tried to find a man who would have a baby with me and didn't succeed very well. Eventually found one, but there were complications because he had a vasectomy. It's a long story. It's all in the book. But so that was why I went for a hormone test, because I thought before I put him under the knife, I better find out if, my bits are working. So I went for the test, just assuming everything was fine. And the doctor said to me, you have the hormonal profile of a postmenopausal woman. And that was just like the bomb just sort of dropped, really. I didn't know how to respond to that. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know anything about menopause. All I knew was that it meant you were old when you went through menopause.
Exactly.
that was what I just knew. And in fact, when I came out of the doctor's office, the image in my head was that I was now a shriveled up old prune. And nobody had actually told me that. But that's, I think, a lot of the messages that we get in society as women going through menopause. And it took me a long time to realize that I was being ageist against myself by having that idea. And it took me a long time to realize that that was a load of rubbish. I was no less of a sexy, vibrant woman than I'd ever been. I was of no less value in the world than I'd ever been. But I allowed that diagnosis of early menopause to completely change how I felt about myself. And so I went on this, I know it's a cliche to go on the journey, but I really did go on a journey, and it was over a number of years. But the initial bit of it was very strange, because I'm a natural researcher and I want to find out what's going on. So I found a number of resources, including the Daisy Network, which is a really good organization supporting women who've gone through early menopause. But I also found Dr. Marilyn Glenville, who was a nutritionist. And I went to see her, and she said, no promises, but if you do what I tell you to do, you might get your periods back and you might get your fertility back. So I did exactly what she told me to do, which was basically changing my diet. She also gave me a sort of herbal tincture, which I think had some Agnus castus in it or something like that. But predominantly it was changing my diet and making sure that I had as few toxins in my environment as possible. By that, I mean eating organically, but also natural skincare, because anything you put on your skin goes straight into your body and straight into your bloodstream. So I cut out alcohol, I cut out sugar, I cut out caffeine, and I went completely organic. And I ate every 3 hours or so. And the primary aim of this was to try and keep my blood sugar levels stable. Because what I didn't realize is that when we start to go into perimenopause and our hormones, start to fluctuate, we can exacerbate that by letting our body believe that we are in a fight or flight situation. And that doesn't mean we have to have the tiger staring down at us, or even, a work problem or anything like that. It can literally be that we've overstimulated our body by having too much sugar, or we've not had enough to eat, so our blood sugar levels have plummeted. And what then happens is that when those blood sugar levels are fluctuating, the body thinks it's under stress, so it will prioritize the stress hormone production instead of the sex hormone production, and therefore we get into even more trouble when those hormones start to fluctuate during perimenopause. So that's a very long way. I don't know where I went down a bit of a rabbit hole there, didn't I? But so
that's
was
great. That's great
why
information.
I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because I got the periods back. Yeah, that was the point. So I did what she said, and I got my periods back. So then I was flabbergasted. What's going on? But that taught me that we have so much more control over our menopause experience than we perhaps think we do, and that there are all sorts of things we can do to help ourselves. We don't have to sort of go, oh, woe is me, this is terrible, and look what's happened. We can actually start to do things. And I think about the issues that women have around menopause as sort of like the canary in the coal mine, that they're the body's early warning system telling us that we need to do something differently. And if we listen, we have a chance to make some changes. So I wrote the book to write all of that down so that other women didn't feel like dried up old prunes when they found out they were going through menopause. So they understood that it could happen a lot earlier than we think it's going to happen, that it doesn't diminish our value in any shape or form. And actually, I say in the book that the end of my fertility has become the most fertile time of my life. I'm doing things now that I never would have dreamt of before. And I wanted to communicate that to women as well, and to give them a path through menopause that deals with the messy stuff, but then uses all the good stuff that we get from menopause to create, a fabulous, magnificent next chapter.
I just lost my train of thought. I hate that when it happens. I had too many thoughts in my head. You and I talked earlier about, yes, I'd gone through early menopause too. I, probably was fully postmenopausal at 45, but like you did in the book, you kept having the test done because it can fluctuate. And at 50, my doctor said, well, yeah, I'm just going to give up. You're really postmenopausal. But I was also, my middle son and his girlfriend were getting ready to have a baby. And I think I was like 45 when that was happening. And I was declared, postmenopausal at 45. And so I did feel like a lot of women feel at 45. I was like, oh my gosh, my life's over. I'm a grandma and I'm postmenopausal at 45. It really gets into your head. And I didn't really know a lot about menopause at that time because I didn't have a lot of symptoms. I didn't have a lot of hot flashes. I didn't have a lot of irritability. It was actually pretty easy for me. I don't tell a lot of women that because they get angry at me, but I'm like, it was just super easy for me in some ways. It was all like mostly between my ears was what a lot of my problem was with menopause. But you say that, in the book, you say, like you just said, the end of your fertility has become the most fertile time of your life, because midlife is more than just menopause. It's like, and I think you and I both have found that out. So if you want to talk about that a little bit, how can we encourage women to move past thinking of menopause as, oh, I'm shriveled up and old and nothing's good going to come from my life ever again? How can we get them moving past that?
There's so much negativity about midlife, isn't there? I mean, if you put midlife into Google, you just get midlife crisis. And that is the idea that we have, that midlife is a crisis. And for women, you've got menopause. And while I love the fact that people are talking more about menopause now, I get very upset because the overarching narrative is negative. And I see menopause as puberty in reverse. And puberty is difficult. Childbirth is difficult. There are many things in a woman's life that are difficult, but the overarching narrative for puberty and childbirth is very positive. That's not the same for menopause. And so that's why I climb onto my soapbox and I start waving my arms around, because I want it to be positive. I mean, I have this dream that we will celebrate menopause. There is so much to be grateful for menopause. And I feel that we come into our real power and authority and influence the older we get. And actually, when we are not having estrogen pumping around our bodies, I talk about estrogen as being the biddable hormone. So it's the hormone that keeps us behaving, you know, it's the hormone that makes us look after everybody else apart from ourselves. It's the one that makes us want to nurture. And when we have less of it, guess what? We're on a greater parity with men, and we stop giving so much of a, you know, about stuff and about other people, and we start prioritizing what we want. And we can direct our energies, you know, away from other people and into our own hearts, and do what really excites us. So that's how I want to reframe menopause, as this, you know, it's a natural transition. And at this stage, I always like to tell my whale story. So can I tell the whale story?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So there are two creatures on this planet who go through menopause. There's human females and there are whales. And when whales go through menopause, they become the leaders of their pods. It is a matriarchal society, and often for up to 50 years. And I first found out about this because I interviewed a woman on my podcast called Darcy Steinke, who wrote a wonderful book called Flash Count Diary, which was a personal memoir about her menopause. And she became obsessed with this whale who was known as J2, otherwise known as Granny. And she used to track the whale, because you can do that online now. You can find out where they are. Yeah. And of course, they can be identified because of the dorsal fin. So she got in a boat and she went to an island. And then from the island, she got in a kayak or something like that. And she actually had an encounter with Granny. And she credits that encounter with Granny with completely transforming how she felt about menopause, because here was this whale leading 3 pods, in fact, and it just, everything sort of shifted for her. And it didn't just impact her emotional experience of menopause, it shifted her physical symptoms too, because the research that I found is that, you know, the more we fear menopause, the worse it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. Obviously there are some physical symptoms and some women have a really difficult time. But like you, I didn't have a difficult time either. But I also changed the way I live. And I think that made a big difference. But so I think if we can all be more whale and see this as a natural transition in our lives, and one which will bring great things, and stay curious. I'm always talking about stay curious about what's going on in your body, how you feel about things, and never, ever, ever accept a narrative or accept something you've been told without questioning it, because there's so much negativity out there. And it all goes back, there was a book written in 1966, the year of my birth, and it was called Feminine Forever, and it was written in the States by Robert A. Wilson. And he basically wrote that postmenopausal women are castrates, and with hormone replacement therapy forever, their genitals and breasts will not shrivel.
And he knows this because he's a man.
Yeah. I mean, but this is where so much
I'm
of
gonna
this
have to find that book. That, oh my gosh.
So much of this comes from misogyny and the patriarchy.
Yeah.
You know, we have been pushed down, we have been put into place. And that was his whole point. And he describes, I've written about it in my book, but he describes there was a mobster who came to visit him. And he said that his wife was out of control. She wasn't looking after him anymore. And if the doctor didn't do something about this, he was going to kill her. So she then went on regular hormone therapy. And before long, she was nice and compliant and looking after hubby again. And I'm just sitting there going, ooh. I mean, that's just, it's awful, isn't it? So we were supposed to be feminine and juicy for our menfolk forever. And then we would be perfect. But that just keeps us stuck. Yeah. It doesn't allow us to grow into who we are supposed to be, who we are supposed to become.
You know, one of the also, you know, I think to coincide with the negative narratives is just the silence around it. So I was, back when I worked in the office, the therapist who was next door to me had asked me something about, because I talk about it all the time. It's like, yeah, I'm postmenopausal. It's like, you know, I'm proud. It's like a badge I wear tattooed on my forehead. I'm postmenopausal. So I did talk
Don't mess with me.
Exactly. So I did talk to about work, because I worked in an office with women. But the really sad thing was, she said, I don't know anything about menopause. I'm 40 years old. I'm starting to feel different. She says, I know nothing. You know, my mom's not saying anything. And I said, well, honey, you come to me, I will help you out. And I also tell my daughter that, who's 37. And if she's going to be like me and my mother, who was postmenopausal at 50, she's going to start, you know, showing some symptoms. Because I missed my first period at 40. And I tell you what, Rachel, I went into a tizzy. I never missed a period except when I was pregnant. I was 40 and I missed a period. I went to my doctor. She did the test. The rabbit did not die. And she said, it's just your age. And I was like, you know, but my mom never talked about it. And I was when I was reading your book, I was flashing on a memory with my mom, who got a bladder infection. And, you know, when you have bladder infections and kidney infections, your urine will be pink sometimes. And she said this, she said, I need to go to the doctor. She goes, I know it's not my period because I haven't had a period in years. And I'm like, what? I didn't know this. You know, I didn't know that you were like postmenopausal. We never talked about it. So I think that's where a lot of the stereotypes and stigma and things come from, because we have been silent about it. And then when we do talk about it, it's in some negative terms. But before you go on to that, I want to say this before I forget. There's a book out, and I got it several years ago, and I gave it to my daughter. It was 150 Years of Their Own Good, where men doctors told women things like I'll have to link it down below in the show notes. I wish I looked it up, but it just flashed on me. But it talks about how doctors told women things about menopause, like, you know, the doctor that you talked about in Feminine Forever. So just crazy stuff, you know, like our uterus wanders around and
oh yes,
you know,
there's a book called Unwell Women, which I'm reading at the moment.
Yeah,
it's about the history,
the
history of women's health and how it's always been subject to men.
Well, you know,
this idea that the uterus used to wander around. Yes,
I'm just like, wow, that's impressive. I didn't know that my organ had so much power. Well, and then that's where the term hysteria and hysterical came from. Women were hysterical because their uterus wandered through their body. Well, I would be hysterical too if my uterus wandered through my body. Like, stay still, uterus. But in this book, 150 Years for Her Own Good, or whatever it's called, it was written by Barbara. I can't ever pronounce her last name. She also wrote Nickel and Dimed. But back in the day, women were the healers. We collected the herbs, and we went to people's homes, and we were the healers, and we knew things. And then they started to make medicine a what's the term I'm looking for? Anyway, you had to go to college to get a degree in medicine, and only men were allowed to go to college back in the day, So that really, like you talked about, really pushed women out of helping other women. So there's been this silence around it for so many years too, which then people just have to guess or make assumptions or go with the stereotypes of the shriveled up breast and, dry, vaginal dryness and all the stuff that comes with menopause.
That's one of the reasons why I want to also talk to younger women so that they are prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say, my motto is be prepared, not scared, because when women do start to get symptoms and they don't know what it is, one of the first things they can experience is brain fog. And then the number of women who think they've got early onset Alzheimer's, because of course we automatically go to the worst possible thing.
Go to Google and you're always dying of everything. So yeah.
And then women go to the doctor and they're prescribed an antidepressant.
Yeah.
Instead of given advice and support for how they can balance their hormones better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is a mess. But one of the good things that's happened over here is that it is actually going to be part of the curriculum at school now. So sex education is not going to end with childbirth, which is what it has done up until now, which is why we're ignorant about what's going on with ourselves when we get a bit older.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. I don't know if we're doing that here in the States or not.
I don't think you are yet, but
yeah,
that's good if you could.
We'll definitely have to look up. But I do. I am not an expert, a doctor. I just know what I've been through. So I think it's just really important if a young woman comes to you in her 40s or 30s and says, I don't know anything about this. Can you help me to not be silent about it and to direct them to resources? And I don't know, maybe that's why I was super confused because I'm thinking, because my sister didn't go through menopause until she was like 51 or 52. And she'd always, like, I hate you, I'm still having periods. You haven't had a period for 10 years. But I don't know. I just felt super confused because, and my doctor I love my doctor, but she kept saying to me, you're too young. You're too young to be going through menopause. I'm like, but I feel funny. I feel something. And so that's when she did the hormone test on me. And she's like, oh my gosh, you have no estrogen. You're not producing any estrogen whatsoever. She goes, but like you said in your book, she goes, let's test you a little down the line, because if you're in perimenopause, then those are going to fluctuate on you. And I was like, oh, okay. And then when I kept going back for tests, and then she declared, you're postmenopausal. You're too young, but you're still postmenopausal. And that didn't really help my situation at all, because I'm too young. Is that bad? What does that mean exactly? So that was sort of a really kind of scary time in my life in terms of my menopause and not really understanding it. But one of the things too that happens when we start to get older, and I was guilty of this for a few years, is that we start getting the gray hair, which mine is coming in a lot now. We get the wrinkles, our waistline expands a little bit, and our body sort of shifts around. And then we try to cover up, and you talk about this in your book, which I really liked a lot. We cover up the visible signs of aging. So when we do that, Rachel, first of all, you talk in your book about that's not really a decision that we come to on our own. If no one ever told us about Botox, we'd never know about Botox, right? We'd never know that these wrinkles are bad. Let's get rid of them with Botox. But beyond that, what are we saying to people when we cover up our signs of aging? And before you send me email, because people always send me mail when I say something they disagree with, if you want to color your hair or get Botox, more power to you. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You do you. But what are we telling society and other people what do you think, Rachel, when we cover that up? What are we saying?
We are saying that it's bad. we are saying that it is less than covering it up. We're saying that wrinkles are bad. We're saying that grey hair is bad. We're saying that, I mean, even faces that look tired to us, because that's always subjective, are bad.
Well, we're just saying basically aging is bad.
Yeah. And aging is not bad. Aging is a natural process that we're doing from the day we're born.
Yeah.
We're getting older right from the very beginning. And I think this discrepancy as well between men and women is terrible. It's shameful, that, you know, men can become silver foxes and they don't worry about it, but women can't. And that I also find out, I did a blog post actually, because there's a load of silver sisters on Instagram, and I featured them all in a blog post that I did. And I think it's a bit like when you come out as gay, you have to keep explaining yourself. You have to keep explaining why you don't dye your hair. And I should preface, right? So I don't dye my hair, but it looks as if I do because I've got a full head of color in my hair. But my mother at 87 still has some color in her hair. So I'm really sorry. But if you look closely, there are some white hairs here at the front. And I go, oh, look, there's a white hair or two. So, and I like to think that if I was going, you know, grayer or whiter, that I would embrace it, because I think it can look stunning. And I think also when we dye our hair and we've got different color skin as we get older, it kind of looks a bit out of sync. It doesn't look as natural to me as the natural hair color. But yeah, why on earth should we cover things up? Why should we feel we have to? But I know that many women, for example, at work, they feel they've got to, because they feel that if they don't, they will be overlooked. Now that is an issue with society. And that is where I am really trying to effect change, because that is ageism and it is sexism combined with ageism, so women get the double whammy. And because we only see beauty as youth. I was on a radio show yesterday, actually, and the guy was saying, yeah, but you know, when we get older, we have inner beauty, don't we? And I said, yeah, but you're still equating beauty with youth by talking about older people having inner beauty. I believe that older people can be just as beautiful as younger people. I like to say that we don't dismiss the autumn leaves in favor of the spring blossom. Both are beautiful. One is just an evolved form of beauty. So if we can extract youth from that idea of beauty, I think we stand a better chance of enabling women to feel comfortable about showing their age. And also when we tackle the ageism in society, which begins between our ears, because we're doing it to ourselves most of the time to start with, sister. because we've been taught to do that, but then we can be the most critical. And we need to really work on those things, working on our own internal ageism, working on societal ageism, not accepting adverts where you've got a 24-year-old model marketing anti-ageism creams, you know, where I've got stepdaughters who are probably using anti-aging products in their teens. You know, it's just obscene. Really is obscene. And
it's a horrible message. My dad died when he was 78, and he had hair like this. So I think my hair is really not going to get much grayer, but my mother dyed her hair forever and permed it. And this was back in the 70s, you know, when you did those nasty home perms, and she dyed her own hair, and her hair got all fried and ugly and stuff. Well, she had a brain aneurysm, so she had to have surgery, and they shaved half her head. And so she just went ahead and shaved all of it. And her hair came back, and Rachel, so beautiful and soft and gray, completely gray. And I told her, I'm like, Mom, if you dye your hair again, I am going to throttle you. Your hair is gorgeous and you look so good. My mom died what I consider to be really young at 62, but I was so glad she finally embraced that and decided to go completely gray. My sister's completely gray too, and I think I have my dad's hair. But it's a catch-22 for us. So if we're told by society, cover up your grays so you don't look old, and then we go and we try to get a job with gray hair, do you I don't know if I understand what I'm trying to say, but it's like,
it's hard. I
the
know it's
more
hard.
the more we accept and go in and say, yes, I have gray hair and that's how it's going to be, but I can do a great job for your business. How do we, just keep that process going so that women don't feel like, well, I've got to color my hair so I can get this job, or I've got to dress a certain way, or whatever.
I think it's about doing things like we're doing, but talking about it, promoting women who have embraced the grey. As well as that blog post, I have an interview with Rachel Peru, who she's a model here in the UK, and she's a plus size model, and she's also a silver model, and she didn't start modeling until she let her hair go grey.
Yeah.
And she's stunning. She's so beautiful. And she has the most gorgeous silver hair. So I think if women want inspiration, they should go and find the Silver Sisters on Instagram, because there are so many of them, and they are gorgeous and they are strong, and they put out videos saying, anybody that tells me I should be dyeing my hair, well, just go yourself, because I am not listening. I am not having anything about it. This is me, and this is who I want to be. Because the thing is, the more we do cover up the visible signs of aging, then we're not showing up as we naturally are. So when people say that older women are invisible, we kind of contribute to making ourselves invisible by covering up the signs of aging, because we're not showing up as we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Therefore, we're not seen. So there's that issue as well, as to, the extent to which we're contributing to our own invisibility.
Anytime I see a woman out and about with gray hair, I always go up and say, I love your hair, because I do. And they're like, oh, thank you. I'd gone to a fundraiser in November, I believe. And I was walking with my friend who's much younger than I am. She's got just, really dark, thick black hair. And these two guys walked by and they're like, oh, pointed right at me, like, oh, I love your hair. I'm like, oh, well, thank you. So that was really great. But I always tell women, I love your gray hair. It looks so good on you. And they're always like, oh, well, thank you. They seem a little taken aback that someone would talk about their hair like that. I actually have an interview scheduled with, she has a magazine she's on Instagram. So Silver, I think she's one of the Silver Sisters people. I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but she reached out to me. So I'm actually going to be doing, have a conversation with her as well. So I'm really super excited about that.
I'd really like to see some silver hair ladies on prime time TV, because that you don't often see.
Yeah.
And you don't often see older women anyway. We get farmed out to pasture. You get the ridiculous scenario of a leading man, whether he's reading the news or he's in a romantic comedy, the person that he's next to has to be 20 years younger than him, which is just another obscenity. So if we can get more older women who are just the way they are, that haven't had the Botox, that haven't had the fillers, that haven't had the silver hair, the dyed hair, then the better, because then we start to see people. I think it's like race, isn't it? If we see more people of different colors in the media, if people see themselves reflected in images in the media, whether that be skin color or hair color, then it empowers us all to be more authentically who we are.
Exactly. And one of the reasons that I do this podcast and talk to women is that I really want to bust through those stereotypes of what it's like for women to be a woman over 50, because the women I interview, some of them are in their 80s writing books and, going on motorcycle trips and, climbing mountains and, just doing, I think, some amazing things. So the more that we get those type of women out there and know that we're not going to go silently off into the stereotypes of women over 50, but we still can do these amazing things. So like you, I am really passionate about showcasing women such as yourself who are out doing these things after 50. My mom retired at 60. Well, she retired at 62 and died on just a little less than a year later. But she retired to her recliner, literally. She just quit working after 30 years or so, set herself in a recliner and died a year later. Now, she did have some health problems, but I'm thinking, did my mother have aspirations? Did she want to do something beyond retirement, or was she just afraid, didn't know, because that's not what women did back in 1996, that sort of generation. So I'm really happy to have this conversation with women over 50. And I'm always telling my daughter, my daughter's like, I can't wait till I'm 50. Chelsea's going to be 18. I can go do the things that you're doing. She goes, I can't wait till I'm 50. So I'm like, woo-hoo!
Brilliant. You're doing a good job there, Shelly. Good job.
I know.
It's so important because, well, if you think, right, how much time, if we go for 50, right, if you think about what you did between 20 and 50, that's 30 years.
Yeah.
Most people will have achieved quite a lot. An average life expectancy in the West is over 80.
Yeah.
And that's average. You might live a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
So that's another 30 years. So what are you going to do? Just sit about?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, really? No.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that only about 25% of the way we age is down to our genes. The rest of it is down to us.
Yeah. We
can put the effort in, and midlife is actually a brilliant time to make up for lost time if we haven't looked after ourselves in the past. And it's really to hear you talk about your mum, because my dad, he lived longer, but he didn't live better.
Yeah.
He took early retirement at 50, and at 55 he sat down in a chair, and by 75 he was dead.
Yeah.
And the last 10 years of his life he had a walker. The last 2 years of his life he was in a care home because he was still so big and heavy, and he had to be winched from wheelchair to bed.
That breaks my
heart.
And
it was awful. And yes, he had some physical issues as well, but he it was chicken and egg, it was like, did the inactivity lead to the physical issues, or was it the other way around? Because he was very inactive, and he didn't look after himself for a long time before he got sick. And it affected everybody else around him as well, the whole family. It wasn't just him. And for years we would say, look, can you just do this, do some exercise, go for a walk, do this, that, the other. And he wouldn't. He was very stubborn. And it was also, I think, as you said, it was a different era. When you retired, you did very little, but then that's not going to give you the long and inspired life that a lot of us crave. And that's certainly what I want. I mean, I'm not stopping anytime soon.
No, and I don't plan on either, because I'm so inspired by the women that I talk to. But one of the things too you talk about in your book, which I think is really important, is staying curious. What I call a growth mindset. I think back, I did a lot. I went to college, I birthed children, I had careers and jobs and things like that. But in terms of finding the things that light me up, I have done more since I turned 50 than I did the first 49 years of my life. I mean, I'll try anything. I tell people this story. Doug Pitt, Brad Pitt's brother, owns a company here in Springfield, and one of my friends co-owned the company with him. They built websites for RV dealers. So they wanted me to write copy for RV websites. And I'm like, sure, why not? It was a snoozer, Rachel. I hated it, so I quit it. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just going to quit. But I mean, we don't know until like, we don't know till we know. How, like moms always say, how do you know you're going to like it if you don't try it? So I'm always telling women, try something, try it. This is the best time to try it. And if you don't, I feel you're doing a real disservice to yourself and to the other women who are watching you, because most of us, like myself, and probably like you too, Rachel, have the health. We're financially able to, we have the support to do it. And so why are we not doing it? I just am flabbergasted because I'm having I'll be 60 in July. I'm having the best time of my life. I've never had so much fun, so that's my soapbox right there.
I think we're also doing a disservice to the world
Yeah.
if we don't make the very most of ourselves, because guess what? The world is a mess. And I think it needs an awful lot more female energy. And when we're older, we've got wisdom, we've got experience, we can bring that to bear in the world. So I really don't want women to step back. I want them to step forward.
Yeah. So what's the first thing? What would you advise the first thing women to do who feel like, menopause has become my life. I don't know what to do. I'm over 50. What's a small step they can take today to start that
It's a bit
path?
cheeky, but just buy my book.
Well, love it, because for all you
it's all in there.
my YouTubers,
I wrote the book
Yeah.
that I needed.
Yeah. I think
So I put it.
I think I sent you a message like, oh my God, I love your book. I don't remember exactly what I said, but for all my YouTube video people, it is really a good book. Because you not only talk about like actual concrete things you can do with your health, your relationships, issues, some things around sex, but then also a lot about what we talked about here, the more less tangible things.
The self-actualization side of it, the building, the plan for the next chapter. But I think getting curious about what's going on, that would be the thing. And also, I think we have a tendency to rush about, and I think there's a clue in menopause, and some people say it's me, no pause, I'm just going to carry on. And actually I say, no, it's about me, and it's about saying no, and it's about pausing. Because I think midlife is a perfect time to reflect, to stop, to think, to meditate, to contemplate, what do you want next from your, at least hopefully, next 30 years of life? What do you want to do with it? What impact do you want to have? And to think through all the narratives you may have going on in your head that are stopping you from doing that, which is what I cover in the first section of the book, to try and inspire you. So it's about thinking through the mindset, sorting out the physical stuff, getting a plan for you long term that is going to keep you healthy in body and mind long term. And then exploring possibility, because I'm all about possibility. And just because we're over 50, I mean, it doesn't mean there's less possibility. There's probably more, because we've got the confidence now. We feel more self-assured. We feel less bothered about what other people think about us, hopefully. So we can just say, okay, it's time for me now. What am I going to do?
I also, other than buying your book, which is really a good book, I highly recommend it. And you can find a link on my website, or I'll put Rachel's information down below to find it. But oh, there I go again. Train left without me. That happened. I get these thoughts, too many thoughts in my head, and I can't get them out quick enough. But yes, sit with yourself. Figure out what you want to do, and it's going to take more than a couple of. One of the things I recommend is like just start writing it down and keep writing and writing and writing and writing, because what happens is the first thing that comes into your head are the narratives you hear. Well, I should be doing this, or I should be doing that. So just really, keep at that, and then find a community of women. I know you have a community of women. I have a community of women. There's the Silver Sisters on Instagram. There's so many communities out there. Find a community of women that really feel like you can belong to, not just fit in, but belong to, and surround yourself with that. Because one of the things I say, Rachel, all the time is my podcast guests have changed my life. Literally, full stop. They have changed my life. It's such a great community. So I also advise that as well as buying your book. Seriously.
Sounds
Okay,
good to
my friend,
me.
we've been talking, gosh, for a long time, which is great. Do you have any before we head off? Do you have any parting words? Anything else you'd like to say to our guest? Feel free to have at it.
I don't know, really. I think I've said
I think
most
we've
of
talked
it, but I
about.
think, yeah, I think we've covered most of it, but it's never too late and you are never too old. I would refer everybody to Tao Porchon Lynch, who I met when she was 97. She started ballroom dancing in her 80s. She went on America's Got Talent at 96. And she died sadly at 101. And I was hoping she'd go on forever. But she was the most beautiful woman I have ever met. And that was physically outside, but also the fact that her face just shone and lit up the room, you know, and she was amazing. So yeah, just believe that you can be and do whatever you want. I mean, you know, it may be too late for you to win a marathon, but, you know, have a go at a 10K or whatever it is, you know, but it's never too late. You're never too old.
Great words to end our conversation on. Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate our conversation. Lovely time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.